That's like for me, that's something I've actually been considering as of recent, and just investing in something just like a secondary camera, something like maybe like another M50 or M100 or something like that, just to get like similar quality to what I have now. Because what the thing is, like, if you got to think of like the trade offs, and that like your phone camera, it's not going to produce obviously the exact same quality. And I mean, in terms of like, some people don't care about this, but other content creators do. It really depends where you stand on this, but I mean, in terms of consistency, like when you have different clips or footage in your video where you say you have like, I don't know, so it's like a few clips that are shot on like a really nice camera, whatever it is that you have, and then you have this like you're shooting like the next clips on like, say, like an iPhone. It's like some whatever B-roll footage or whatever it is that you have. It's not consistent, and I feel like it doesn't really like it doesn't. I don't know if that doesn't bother you, then it's whatever. But to some people, that really gets under the skin, and that for me, that's why I'm considering investing in like another body, just because of that reason. Like, I want to be consistent with the content that I'm putting in there. But again, though, if you're not in that budget range, I think it's really smart what Vincent said, especially with like the apps. Like, there's tons of them out there. I personally haven't used one, but this is something like another thing that I'm considering. But again, I want to make sure that it's up to par, it's up to my standards for what I'm putting out, because I don't want to have, half my footage in the video like being like, 1080p or 4K or what, that really smooth footage, and then the other half of the clips are shot on my phone, and they're like really crappy quality, right? They're all pixelated and grainy and whatnot. So it it really comes down to like, what is it that can you afford, and like, does that matter to you, like with being consistent or not? So if it doesn't, then it's whatever. But if it does, then I mean, I don't know, I guess you got to look at maybe investing in something, or getting like a really like high grade app that will allow you to produce the quality with the phone or the images that you're capturing in your phone.
Yeah, and if you allow me to intervene and actually answer a question instead of asking it, since because when I started, as I said, when I started, I was exclusively filming by phone only, and this was for a long time, maybe half a year, 6 months, and it so happened that I got a little bit of experience with that. So what I wanted to say, from first hand, is basically what Vincent said, and it's the biggest con of the phones is the small sensor, and respectively, it's the aperture. It's everything's pretty much software um, i- applied software. The software is actually fixing the aperture and the ISO and the shutter speed and so on and so on. So what I found is the problem with phones, because I'm shooting with a phone XR, which is not, it's not terrible, but the phones get this really shallow picture, really, too over sharpened. And what you don't get with a phone is, the focal length. You don't have, even with a kit lens, you got the vario lens, and you can zoom in and out. You can adjust your aperture, which is the effect of it is, not only it's changing the light, it's coming to the camera, to the sensor, but it's also changing your focus and how the background appears. So whenever I'm shooting with a phone, I'm like a general guideline, I would suggest place it as close as you can get it to the object you're filming, because the further it is from the object, the flatter the image is gonna look, which is rarely a desired outcome. So the other thing is about apps. Yeah, the stock camera app of iPhone sucks for video. So what I could recommend are actually two apps. They're both paid, but they're worth every cent. One of them is Filmic Pro, which in my humble opinion is hands down the best app for video on a phone, and the other one is ProTake. So these apps are actually giving you the full control over capturing video with your phone. You can change your frame rates, you can change the ISO, shutter speeds, whatever. Everything's done by the software, so it's still not gonna look like a camera, like a DSLR or mirrorless, or even a handycam. But still, it's a lot better than just pointing and shooting with your stock app. So if you've got nothing else, you're on a budget, you've got only your phone, this shouldn't stop you from filming videos. Just try to do it as professionally as you can. Invest like $15 into an app, and yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was actually going to bring that up, but you brought it up already. The other thing that aperture adjusts, other than the amount of light in the lens, like you were saying, is depth of field. So a larger aperture number, bigger f numbers like f16, you take that picture, the thing you focus on plus the background behind it is going to be in focus. If you take something like f2.8, which is a really large physical aperture, a really small aperture number, that picture, when you take it, whatever you focused on is going to be separated out from the background, because the background is going to appear completely out of focus and blurry compared to the thing that you actually focused on. So that's something else definitely to consider with phones, is that because the sensors are so small, the depth of field is often very large and deep, and lots of stuff is going to be in focus, even if you don't want it to be.
And the bokeh it's actually a software one. It's just blurring the image softwarely. It doesn't have anything to do with focus.
Right.
All right, cool. So to take the phone conversation a step further, myself and Dimitar were both drummers. Now, if you're a guitar player at home or you're a vocalist at home, odds are good that you don't really need more than one camera. Maybe you have a second and you can do some cool stylized stuff with them when you're creating your own content for your YouTube channel or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, you really only need to capture yourself using one vantage point. From the drum set, it's a different scenario. You can do drum covers. In fact, I have drum covers on my channel that were shot in one take with one camera, and there was no angle changes of any kind. That's definitely an option. And there are channels, in the case of Matt McGuire, for all the drummers out there, for the case of Matt McGuire, he's built an incredible career using only one angle, and he did it very creatively, the way he did it with the fisheye, and it sort of became his signature, the fact that he only has one camera. However, when it comes to Dimitar and my style, we need at least 3, maybe 4 angles. It's good to have the foot cam, it's good to have the above, the top down, the left and right, whatever the case may be. Usually with the drums, it's 2 to 3 angles, and you can really capture the full kit. Now, having said all that, and that's my preface, having said all that, into the question, drummers, because of that, we have to sometimes, jerry rig things together. Sometimes I get to use, sometimes I even have used a cell phone, a webcam recording into OBS, and a DSLR, in my case, the M100, as 3 separate angles. Now, there's a lot of problems that arise here. First, I want to talk about why there's problems that come up, and then how you can maybe fix them at a later, at a later point in the production process. So that everything looks similar, right? And the biggest thing that I notice when I get my footage shot from different devices into my editing suite is that right away it's apparent that these colors do not look the same. Why is that, and how can you go about fixing that at a later date?
So for the given camera manufacturers, they all use different color profiles. There's a standard color profile called sRGB, and there's a couple other ones, Adobe RGB, P3. But when they build their camera algorithm to generate output, all the algorithms are a little bit different in how they handle color. And that's actually one thing I should have discussed when we talked about the pros and cons of cell phone cameras and things like that. But different devices will always have different color profiles. That's just the way it is. Even as far as cameras, like like my A7, if I take a lens made by Carl Zeiss for Sony and I take a Sony lens and I shoot the same image, I'm gonna have slightly different color profiles just because of the way that the lenses are constructed, the way that the light goes through them, the different coatings on the glass that make up the lens, things like that.
Can I interrupt you real quick? I
Yeah.
actually want to just ask a question real quick about that. You're stating that there always will be variation. Not to argue that at all, but just take me a little bit further. Why is that the case? Like, why is it that a camera can't capture something the same as another camera in the same room on the same subject with the same lighting? Why isn't that the case? Like, you would think that there'd be a constant at some point, right?
I I mean, honestly, I don't know.
Oh,
I
above you? Okay, sorry. I was,
no, I just mean I don't know why manufacturers haven't sat down and said, look, this is the algorithm we need to use to generate
oh,
output. My instinct is that it's probably because they all think that what they have is slightly better than their competitor. But I mean, it's something that I've seen talked about for years as a photographer. Like, oh, I really like the Sony colors. Minolta, who Sony bought, they were known for color matching all of their professional level lenses, so that when you put those lenses on the camera, it was always the same color profile no matter what.
nice.
But it just has to, and I think honestly too, part of it is the actual JPEG algorithm itself. So for those that may not know, and if you guys don't know, I'll briefly explain. A JPEG is a lossy format, meaning it takes some of the input and it throws it away based on science about our eyes and our brains and how we interpret stuff and whatever. So every image that you feed to a JPEG algorithm it's gonna throw out bits and pieces of that image to reduce the file size. When you're using a camera and you're shooting in RAW, which is not a lossy format, like for me, my images are 30 something megabytes a piece, which adds up to a lot of storage over time. JPEG is like 4 megabytes. So that also feeds into the color issue, is that each picture is a little different. When I'm outside taking pictures of birds, the sun is moving, different pieces of trees are moving and stuff wherever the bird is, the angle of the bird, the way the light hits its feathers, those things are all infinitely and minutely changeable, and our eyes naturally compensate for that, but our cameras can't. So when those images are fed to a JPEG algorithm, the output that comes out is always a little bit different, and you have to color balance each one a little bit differently than the one before it. And it's even more so, like we were saying, when you're moving between cameras from different manufacturers, different sensors, different whatever, all those color profiles are going to be different. And they all end up having to be individually corrected to make them all fit together when you try to start stitching that footage together. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. So now, let's say I do film on a bunch of cameras. How can I go about fixing this? Is there a way, and how would I do that? What's the quickest way, I guess? Because I imagine there's probably a couple solutions.
So the way I like to do it is I find a single white balance point in my frame. So if you have 3 cameras at 3 different angles, if there's something neutral that all of those cameras can see in each of those angles, when you load that into Premiere Pro, or in my case in Lightroom, I have a white balance dropper. The white balance dropper uses a separate algorithm to generate the correct white balance for that frame based on knowing that the camera makes everything 18% gray. So if you can see that neutral point from all 3 angles, or you can make sure that you have a neutral point when you load it onto your computer to do editing, you can white balance that same neutral point every single time for your 3 different cameras and your 3 different angles, and you should get a white balance that is extremely close to each other, which makes the little final tweaks you have to do, if you even have to do any, makes it a lot easier to fix than having to look at each picture and say, okay, well, this one I'm going to color balance on this drum shell, and over here I've got this white over here, so I'll color balance on that. When you do that, you will get the correct white balances, but because you're white balancing on slightly different stuff, you're still going to have to do a little more work to fine tune and make everything really look like it was shot on the same. It's a single piece of footage when you splice it together. So that's the way I do it. Brad may have another way that he does it.
Perfect. Yeah, Brad, do you have anything you want to weigh in on this subject?
Honestly, I think like one of the main things that Vincent had touched on, and this is something like he taught me recently. This is like going like over like the photos that we took. It's just the white balance, and that's so important to take into consideration. It's something you got to make sure you're doing like whatever editing software you're using. Like for me, it was Lightroom, and just learning like why that's important. Like I know we talked about this in the beginning of the conversation too. Just like white balance, and making basically balancing out like all the colors in the photo. But it's so like important, especially if you're going to take like editing your images further than like what they already are. Like say like adjusting the exposure, the contrast, any of the colors or anything like that. It's always important to make sure you're starting off with your white balance first. So that's like the main thing like I would add, because for me, like before I wasn't doing that, and now that like I've gone since Vincent taught me that, and it's like it's such like a basic thing, but it literally makes like a world of difference in terms of like editing your photos. So if that's something you're into.
Perfect. Cool. Okay. Well,
sorry, just a quick one as we're on the topic of white balance and exposure, because for me at least, these are the two primary objectives that everybody needs to meet, to get a good white balance and great exposure. So on the topic of that, are you using, and can you recommend any tools or any guidelines about achieving not maybe the perfect, but as best as possible exposure? So could you probably touch a little bit on histograms or maybe waveforms, and do you actually use the pre-built white balance profiles into your camera or your phone, or you're just trying to shoot as neutral as possible and just fix it in post afterward?
Oh, that's a good
Fix it in
question.
post. It's one of my favorite sayings. We'll fix it in post. For me, I touched on this briefly, but I shoot everything in RAW because it's a lossless format. I want all of the information that my camera can provide to me. Also, when you shoot in RAW, your camera doesn't make any decisions for itself. The image that it actually saves to your memory card is completely unprocessed by your camera. That leaves you in charge of making all the final decisions. And because it's RAW, you do post-processing is required. No photo lab will just take a RAW file and print it. It's not that you can't. You have to post-process it and convert it to a JPEG. But when I shoot, I don't worry about the white balance at all. I worry about the exposure and whether what I'm seeing is set up correctly. Like, I don't want it all blown out, overexposed. I don't want it underexposed, because when you have to correct those things later, especially underexposure, as you bring it up to the correct exposure, areas that are too dark a lot of times will end up being filled with noise if you're not careful. So I do all my white balancing myself in post-processing. Lightroom is a great tool for that because it has the eyedropper. Like I mentioned a second ago, you just find your neutral gray, drag the eyedropper onto it, click, and boom, you have your white balance right there. If you need to fine tune it, it has little sliders, and you just add or remove the colors, green, magenta, blue, and yellow. You just add or remove touches of those colors to get the white balance and the look that you want. But that's how I take care of white balancing. I'll let Brad explain how he does it.
Yeah, so it's funny you had mentioned that about the like shooting everything in RAW. Now, like, I'm pretty sure this is like if I mention this, like this is the same thing with RAW and RAW and shooting log profile. Yeah.
As far as I know, log is like the most color neutral profile ever.
Yeah, just wanted to reconfirm that, because I remember when I first started getting into when I was learning about that, I I was realizing that like when I looked into the M50, there was no option for shooting shooting um, log. So there's a couple apps that are out there. I don't know if Vincent, if you used any of these, but the only reason I looked into them is because my M50 wasn't capable of shooting in a log format. So, and as far as I know, like it's if you're shooting in that type of format, you can pull out most of the details as opposed to like if you're shooting in like if I'm not shooting in like a log format, I'm not going to be pulling as many details from the image. So come post or production, when you're editing those photos, you won't. It's not. How do I say this? It's like you won't be getting like the true raw image, like all like the little fine details, the colors, and all that stuff. So that's something like if your camera doesn't have that, that's something I would definitely consider maybe looking into. Vincent, I don't know if you've heard of something like that before, and this is just me being a beginner. Like I wanted to look into it, so I heard that there was a couple apps out there. I actually have them. I don't know if I can maybe send them to you. Like if you guys have like show notes or something, I can send like a couple links over. But they're actually suggested to me from a couple different people that I follow in the photo and film industry. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If you could DM them maybe after the fact at Dimitar, we could include them for sure.
okay, cool. So yeah, again, Vincent, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you've heard of something like that. But that's something like I kind of became concerned with when I knew I wanted to start shooting more videos, and then somebody was like, "Oh, well, you should be shooting in like log format," and I was looking for my camera and I couldn't find it. I was like, "Oh, well, what the hell?" Like I was like, "I can't have this." So like, and I was thinking that like my pictures and my videos were gonna kind of not fall apart, but if I were to say like color grade them or anything, I wouldn't. They wouldn't be as good as quality as should I had been shooting in log format. I don't know if does that make sense to you?
I have never used log format. I didn't even know what it was until just now.
Oh, okay.
I just
Okay.
I I set my camera to raw and I adjust curves and whatnot in post processing. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about log, but just a cursory look over what I found while we were all discussing and I was waiting my turn. I mean, it looks like it makes a pretty significant difference on images. So
Yeah. So
probably something to definitely look at using.
yeah, and again, that's just because like that's something and this goes back to again to the beginning of our conversation, like making sure you do all your research and like you're happy with what you have, because knowing or not knowing this before and then and finding out after, I was like, oh man, like is this like I really started to think, is this gonna make or break like the quality of like my photos or my videos? So but yeah, if you don't have that option, obviously like yeah, you want to shoot raw, and like you were also saying too, it's going to take up a lot more file space, which I've now come to learn, but again, you can take a lot more details from those photos as opposed to shooting in say like JPEG. So
Cool, guys. So I want to kind of move on from this subject to a new topic. What I want to talk about next is kind of probably going to be a little bit difficult to maybe do justice because we're only on voice. But let's dive in. Let's see what we can do. I want to ask the two of you guys, what are some maybe tricks, but at the same time, maybe just some important things for any content creator, whether it be photo, whether it be video. What can anybody who's trying to make content for the internet do to improve on their framing decisions? So actually capturing and framing a scene, whether it be video or picture. What are some things that you can let the audience know that would maybe improve their shots or their recordings?
do you mean like in
So
Sorry. Do you mean like
No, I was.
so, do you mean in terms of like
Go ahead, Brad, go ahead.
framing like composition? Or
Anything you can give me, you can tell me about thirds. You can tell me about like light, anything that like composition of the shot, or when maybe with the camera, there's some tricks that you have when you're framing to like keep eyes at a certain level, or anything. You let me know.
So you already stole the most common one. It's the rule of thirds. The
I know, and I
brain-
had it in my head the whole time. I wanted one of you to jump on it.
Yeah. So this was the mistake I made when I first started out, and if I look back at the pictures I took in 2009, 2010, because I never get rid of anything. I have 16 terabytes of storage for just such occasions. But looking back in 2009, 2010, all of my pictures, I had my subject dead center in the middle of the frame. And I never could figure out what it was about it that I didn't like, but then I learned about the rule of thirds, and the reason that exists is because the human brain does not like things dead center in the frame. It doesn't. If you take a flower and you put it dead center and you compare it to that same flower moved onto a rule of thirds grid line, I almost guarantee you, unless you're a psychopath, you will like the one on the rule of thirds grid line better. I don't know what it is about our minds that makes us like that, but it's just a fact. So the rule of thirds is one of the most basic and easiest things just to get in the habit of doing, and it will elevate your pictures and your framing so much. And by rule of thirds, we mean take a frame, put 3 lines through it vertically, dividing into thirds, and then put 3 lines through it horizontally, dividing into thirds. You'll end up with a set of grid lines. You want to put if you're filming yourself, put your eyes on one of those grid lines. Like if you are going to have your body in the middle of the frame, the middle third of the frame, that's fine. Put your eyes at the line cutting through the top third of the frame, and you'll see if you compare. I would be willing to bet my next paycheck that you'll think that the one where your eyes are on the grid line is better than the one where you were more centered in the frame. And I think not only does it make your composition better, but it gets rid of a lot of dead space that you don't really realize is there until you start paying attention to it. And that all that dead space also, it's I'm sure Brad can speak to this too. It takes away from a picture just to have that space there that's not really serving any purpose.
yeah, like honestly, that was probably that was like the first thing I learned about like what was like important in terms of like just the framing of the picture and the rule of thirds. And one of the things I actually got into, and this would be like amazing for a beginner, sure, you can picture those like the grid lines, but most cameras actually, they'll enable like a feature in the, like you can find it in the settings, where you can actually enable those grid lines to appear upon your screen. So it's like, instead of you having to make like the guesswork, that's something like I did for about, I used it for about a good like month and a bit, just to kind of get in the habit of always remembering those grid lines and like trying to lock in my photos into those. So and always like just practicing. So it always makes you remember and think like, okay, like how can I frame this as a, like, instead of just taking the usual photo and just everything dead center, how else can you really frame the photo? So I think that's like super important. So even if you're just starting out and you're like, it's just getting in the habit of utilizing those grid lines, I think going into the settings and putting that into the camera settings so you actually see it appear will get you in the habit of doing that more consistently, which I think is really good. And like just like the composition, it's just I feel like composition it's basically like the art of telling your audience what to look at. So like if
That's exactly what it is.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Like that's like, if you can do that, like really like the storytelling comes like from like, and obviously like everybody like what they want to like tell like on their pages or their videos and whatnot. Like it comes down to like your choice of composition, the choice of shots, and that like, and again, like when we were going back, like backtracking in our conversation about gear and like where to start and all the stuff, like and like what to buy. Like, I mean, you can buy like all the fanciest gear in the world, but like it doesn't really mean anything if you don't know how to like use it well. And like really what it comes down to is like, like any of these like these shots and like making things look fancy, like it can be done with any camera essentially. It's just knowing like the basics, and knowing how to utilize your equipment to the best of your ability. That's just what I think, and that's what I've been told by like a lot of people. And like I said, to like in the beginning, I was very indecisive about like what to pick, and I was like going back and forth between so many different bodies and lenses and stuff. And eventually, like one of the guys at the store, he just told me, he's like, man, he's like, honestly, you just need to learn the basics. Like you don't need to buy all this stuff like all at once. Like he's like, slowly build your way up. Like obviously get a good body and like one good lens, but he's like, you don't need everything all at once. He's like, because like you're just gonna feel overwhelmed. You just need to start out with the basics and learn like some of like the fundamentals when it comes to shooting properly. So I think that's something for anybody and everybody to consider.
Okay, so I got one last question, and I would like to ask both you, Vincent and Bradley, to try and list us three things, let's say three things, that are big no-nos, like avoid this, because, you know, you've been, we've all been newbies, and you've all done mistakes. So what could you advise us and the people that are listening to avoid? What are the huge mistakes, top three mistakes that we should steer away from?
So for me, the single most important thing in whether video or photography is light. And there are, especially if you're outside, there's only 2 times a day where the light is really good. It's in the morning and in the evening, the golden hour. And inside, the way you have your light set up in your studio or your shooting environment, super, super important. You don't want to have bad light. That is the single most important part of any image, is the light, the quality of the light. If the lighting's harsh, it's going to it just looks bad. Like if you go outside at noon, there's no shadows, and the shadows that there are very the lines are like on the edge of the shadows are very what's the word? They're very hard. Like there's no blending, there's no feathering, there's no any of that. That's terrible lighting. That's the reason why when you buy studio lights that you need softboxes, because those little small light sources generate such harsh light that when you put it, if you were to just use that, it would just make your shot look bad. Putting it in a softbox diffuses it. It makes you as a subject look prettier and better. It enhances your shadows and gives you depth that harsh light just doesn't give you. So that's the super most important thing for me. Second thing is composition, like we were talking about a minute ago. If you have great light and bad composition, you still have a bad picture, in my opinion. Rule of thirds, super easy thing to apply. Give your pictures an immediate boost. The other one that I thought of while Brad was talking is one called leading lines. And what that means is from the main subject of your frame, you give the viewer's eyeball a path to follow as they take in the rest of the image. So whatever you have as your subject is going to be the first thing you look at. The leading line is going to be the thing that takes them through the rest. So like just looking at a frame of Wyatt's the river cover right now on YouTube, I've got him in the right, and then the leading line that my eye kind of follows is his drum kit. The way his cymbals are set up kind of follows that through the rest of the frame. And then for the third thing that I had in my brain and now has disappeared, it goes back to what we've all been saying all along about buying gear, what Wyatt has said to me about cymbals and drums in general, and I'm sure Dimitar, you know this as well. Don't just go buy things to buy things.
Oh yeah.
Really focus and kind of see, like, this is the composition I want. This is the kind of video I want to shoot. This is the thing I want to photograph. Because that will steer you in a certain direction. It'll steer you towards lenses that fit that subject matter, and it'll keep you from buying a bunch of stuff that you don't need, and you will end up either getting rid of, selling, whatever, but you'll never get all that money back that you spent and the time that you spent researching and investing and going out and looking at it and whatever. You can't get that back 100%. And that was a mistake I made when I was new. I had a ton of lenses, and I got rid of so many because I was like, I don't shoot this anymore, and I'm not really interested in it. And even now, moving from one mount to the other in the Sony ecosystem, I think last time I counted, I had 12 lenses on my original camera, and right now I have 5 on my new camera, my A7 Mark II, and I'm totally happy with those 5 lenses. They do everything I need them to do, and the difference in them is that they're all super high quality professional lenses that are letting me get the images that I want to get, and I didn't have to spend the money on all the steps in between and all the lenses that I didn't need. So that's my 3 things: light, composition, and focus on what you want to shoot, what you want to record, and get equipment that benefits that goal.
Cool. So let's turn it over to Brad for the same question. Brad, this is an interesting one for you too. I don't want to change maybe you probably have something prepared, but I don't want to change it. But this is interesting for you because you are new to this. Maybe you have some literal 3 mistakes that you've sort of made in the last little bit, and you can share with the audience to right away avoid that or something along those lines. Let us know.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say that it's like I was going to mention composition and lighting, but I guess I'll touch in those in in a different way. But I guess one of the things I can start off with is just saying that I would say experimentation is really key in getting like uncomfortable with all the different types of angles you can shoot. Like for me, when I just starting out, that was probably the number one thing I heard from everybody was like, just shoot everything and anything. It's just getting experience behind the lens. And at first I was just thinking like, I was like, well, like that seems like a little bit like extreme, but when it comes down to it, like, I mean, like photography is an art, and there's no like sure there are like technically rules, but at the same time, like it comes down to like what your style is and whatnot, and you're only really gonna find that through experimenting with different types of like ways to like frame things or editing and whatnot. So like you could take, say for example, like you're shooting, say like doing a photo shoot, and like take like multiple different angles. Like don't just like stick within like the rule of thirds. Like get down low on the ground, see if you can like maybe get like up on a ladder and take something like super high, or like just like in really strange spot, like just to see like what you think might look good. Because again, this is an art form, it's a creative form, and like there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, it comes down to creating, and like if you think something might look good in your head and like you have this idea, it's like just try it out, and like what's the worst that's gonna happen? Just scrap it if it looks like shit. You just or sorry, are we allowed to swear in here? Pardon me.
No, it's
okay. Just scrap it if it doesn't look good. But like if it looks good, then awesome. Then and like move on to the next thing. So, but I really think like experimenting and getting much practice as you can behind the lens is like it's super important, especially if you find like your own unique like individual style. Just seeing what works. So I feel like that's like one of the things I would say definitely do is just do basically try to shoot anything you can at any point in time. And with like in regards to lighting too, like I feel like if you overexpose the whites, it's way harder to bring this information back versus like boosting the shadows. It's easier than, and that's just kind of what I've learned. What I've experienced. That might be due to like the certain images or the videos that I'm shooting. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, Vincent, but that's kind of what I've taken.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's just like when it comes to color grading and exposure, like you can never really retrieve the highlights. So just be like aware of your the lighting that you're in, the lighting situation, And if you can, like if it's one thing if you're indoors or do a studio or whatnot, but if you're doing anything outdoors, um, it was like what are you saying, like the best times during the day to shoot. And if you can't, if your schedule or your client or whatever doesn't permit that, I think it's important to really have, like, this is just something random I just thought off the top of my head, but having something like, say, like a an ND variable filter. So I would definitely get one of those. I would pick one of those up. I had purchased one, and I found that it's made like a world of difference in terms of, like, if I have to make, like, if I have to do a shoot during like the middle of the day, if I don't, because I noticed the second I take that variable filter off, it's just like, it's everything just is unbelievably like white. Like it's just you can't discern like anything in the image other than like how like overexposed it is. So
Yeah, it's just bad. There's no other way to
yeah,
put it.
it's just craziness. So, and it's funny because like most people that I work with, like when they're asking me about that, like I just show them the difference. Like I'm like look at the screen, and then I slowly like I'm unscrewing the filter, and then as soon as I take it off, it's just like all of a sudden it's like pitch white. You can't see anything else other than the white. So definitely like a good investment if that's something you can't get around, if you can't work around that. So yeah, and then composition, you already kind of touched on that. And I would also say too, when it comes to like experimenting, not just with like the framing, but like learn the basics of shooting. Don't always shoot in auto. Like obviously it's super simple to do that, but try as much as you can to learn how to shoot manual. And it might take you a while to get the hang of it, but I feel like it would really teach you, the photographer, the videographer, a lot about shutter speed, about aperture, and about ISO. So because when you're adjusting one, you're like what Vince was saying about the triangle, like you're adjusting all the others. So that so if you can basically learn how to, or get more comfortable with shooting manual, and just experimenting with it, even if it doesn't always turn out what you want it to be, it's just getting like getting comfortable with like what you're not comfortable with. And yeah, again, experimenting with the manual settings, because otherwise you're like, it's like I feel like for me at least, those experience, like those learning experiences don't come unless I actually get down and dirty with those things, and I start to experiment with them. It's one thing to learn about them and to read about them, but to actually like experiment with them like firsthand, I think is super important. So because like the more you explore, the better photographer you become, and I feel like that comes down to like basically all the things I just touched on. So makes everything's like shooting in auto makes things simple and easy, but again, the more you explore, the better you'll get. So that's just my opinion, though.
All right, beautiful guys. Thank you so much for everything. We've got one more question to take us out. What I would like for the two of you to do, and we can start with whoever, don't matter to me. I'd like for both of you to identify one or maybe two, but definitely one at least, things that I'm doing with my content, and one thing that Dimitar is doing with his content that we can improve on. So find something about what we put out, where we're making a mistake, and help us fix that. And maybe that can apply to the people listening at home at the same time. So yeah, whoever wants to start, take us away.
So I pulled up your drum cover of the river, and I just kind of clicked around through it and looked at different frames and stuff. At 1:48, like when I look at this particular frame out of the video, the first thing I see is the desk lamp by your iMac, because that is the brightest thing in the picture. So if it was me, I would turn that off. The second thing that I noticed is the Nestle Pure Life water bottles down at the bottom, and that leads me into something that we haven't really talked about, but I think is important, especially for someone new into video or photography. Your background is super critical, because the little things in the background people notice them when they're there, and it's sometimes once you see something, you can't unsee it, and it's just like, damn it, I really like this picture, but I hate that thing is there. I've thrown away tons of pictures because I hate the background. The subject looks great, but the background's trash, and I throw it away. So, for you, Wyatt, I think that's really the only thing is just for your different angles, just make sure your background is as clean as it can possibly be, and that you don't have like a light source that's brighter than the other more important light sources in the room, because the human eye is drawn to those bright things, and you want them to see you first and your luxurious hair instead of the desk lamp by your iMac.
He does have a luxurious hair.
Perfect. Awesome. That's wonderful, Vincent. Composition, I love it. So what's something about
What about
Dimitar's?
me? Yeah.
So for Dimitar, I pulled up Parasite Eve. For you, just in my opinion, I did the same thing. I just bounced around through different frames, different times. At a minute and 32. The thing for you is I don't like where your softbox is for your main light. And it's for the same reason as why it's the little desk lamp. When I look at this, and I think it's more so apparent because of the way you do your lighting, where you have that mood lighting. The first thing I look at when I look at this particular frame is not you or your drums. I look at that softbox.
Yeah.
Because it's the brightest thing there. So if it was me, I would push it out of the frame. But again, I don't know if it's there because that's the light you have, and that's where it needs to be able to light you sufficiently. And again, this it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. If you like having that softbox there, leave it there. But me personally, looking at it purely from a technical perspective, I don't think that softbox should be there. And to say that too for you, Wyatt, it's purely technical. Like, I'm not saying your background is trash.
Yeah, sure.
Dude, if I didn't want it and I didn't want this spoken about in the podcast, I definitely wouldn't have proposed the question, right? Like, it's important to be able to identify stuff like that and fix it, right? Like,
absolutely.
I'm going to take a second. I haven't talked too much to this podcast. I'm going to take a second real quick, and then we'll jump back in. The act of you informing me on that, or the act of being able to sit down and objectively look at that without any emotion and a clean head and understand what's wrong with it and why it's wrong with it and revise it the next time is how you get good at YouTube. It's how you get good at content creation. I'm not even talking anything about photography at this point because I'm not qualified, but as far as the field of what I do daily with my videos and all this stuff, I've said it so many times, it's public trial and error. And that's what you've seen in my channel, is over the course of my channel, every video, I try my best to get slightly better with the next video. And that's because you have record of what you just did. You can literally go and view the video at any time, and you're going to have a bunch of people telling you what you need to fix about it. So when these things come up, just do your best, viewers at home, do your best to revise what the negative critique was or how you are feeling about your work, and then fix it in the next video, and then keep pumping out the videos because it's public trial and error, and it's all about how much content you can get out. Now let's get back into talking about Dimitar's.
Totally.
The only other thing in this at a minute 32,
Yep.
where you have that the little like Edison light bulb with the little fancy filament in it, I would just move it. I would just move it a little bit to the right so it's not touching your beard.
I see.
Yeah, that lets the light bulb stand out on its own, and it doesn't look like it's coming out of your chin.
Yeah, and actually, by the way, while we're talking about this frame, this is shot with a phone, so you can. I'm just getting us a little back on the discussion. You can see how shallow it looks because it's a phone. There is no depth of field whatsoever.
Yeah. But I mean,
yeah, sure.
That, I mean, that's basically nitpicks on both of your stuff. Like, both of you guys do great with composition and lighting.
And we're grateful for your input. Really.
Yeah. So, all right, Brad, your turn.
Okay, so I had just recently, I just found Dimitar's channel, so I'm kind of
nice to meet you.
So I pulled up like a couple videos. I ran through them like really quick. So I'm like, I'm being really, really nitpicky. Like there's nothing that I could say that's, um, it's honestly it's so hard to say because it's like well, one, it's kind of last minute, and then the other thing is just I guess I'm not really seeing too much. Like I mean, like I feel like I have to like really analyze the, um, I guess like the videos and whatnot to find something like that's really like catching my eye. And like the only thing really is like, okay, so like I went to, what was it, the Drummer Reacts Spirit Box Holy Roller.
Yep.
Um,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 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 It's my first reaction, and it's horrible in so many
oh, is
ways.
that right? Oh,
Perfect.
okay.
Let him pick it apart. I
Okay.
can't wait.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so honestly, it's funny because while this was playing, because I was trying to listen into the conversation, but I was watching the video and it's muted. So like I was just trying to see like just anything like like image wise, like what I could see in the frame, not audio
Mhm.
wise. Um, so like the only thing I was gonna say was like lighting, really. Like I mean like, but the thing is like going into this conversation, like just before I even viewed your channel, from what I was taking from what everybody else was saying, like you're going for that more somber, moody kind of look. Like it's more dim light, and that's like that's cool. That's your style, and that's what I was saying about like, sure, like people like I'm nitpicking, and what I was saying earlier about like you're like you have to try different things to find out where your unique style is because there's at the end of the day it's a creative art and like there's no right or wrong answer. It's your own style. So, I mean, people could probably nitpick at this and be like it's super like it's too dark. Like that's I know that's from what I'm seeing, what I've understood, like this is your style.
Mhm.
So I but having not known you like or not um gotten to like throughout this conversation, um that would be something I would be really like picky about. Now, like I really
Yep.
had to also like crank like my brightness up on my computer, and that could just be like because my nets or whatnot, and like just
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the quality of like the screen. But I find that it's very like it's underexposed. So like, and that could be like going to like, say if it's like super extreme and you don't really like realize it, like it's you could use like a histogram as like a reference point or whatnot to see like
Mhm.
how not bad is it, but how extreme is it? How extremely like under or overexposed is my video or image? So, but other than that, like nothing like I really pulled from that. So it's just like say like at the very end, like I'm just kind of going through scrolling and like I think it's at 7 minutes and 13 seconds, and you're looking at the camera, and it's like there's like this like shadow that's kind of going over your beard, and it's like you're like right where it goes over your beard also kind of just like it like just like wraps into the darkness, and it's you maybe this is
Yeah,
going to
it's
be
disappearing.
yeah, so it's like it's super like it's very very dark, but again that's your style, so that is what it is. So um to somebody who doesn't know your style, they might think that's like that's not what they're into, but again like that's me being seriously nitpicky.
Yeah, well, it is my style to be, to have a little darker footage, but on this particular video, to say that it was intended, it would be a lie. It's just,
Yeah,
it's just shit. But yeah, thanks very much. I'm really gonna use this, and I'll do my best to fix it.
yeah, but and the other
if I get, I was just going to interrupt real quick
yeah.
that to build on what you were saying about underexposure. The thing you want to watch for when you're like if you are intentionally underexposing is just to make sure that your blacks don't lose their texture. Like when something becomes solid black, it just kind of like everything that's around it appears like it's kind of floating. But like your t-shirt, when you look at a black t-shirt, you can still see the texture with your eyes. So you just
Yeah.
want to be careful not to lose that when you're underexposing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, on this one, I still didn't have my key lighting and whatever. Yeah, it's bad, and this is what I wanted to ask, because I just thought of this. Sorry, Wyatt, for making this longer. What's your advice? Let's say in my situation, should I shoot darker and then enhance the highlights, or should I shoot more with more light and then just get the shadows from there? What's the better approach? If you're faced in a high dynamic range scenario.
So, what I alluded to like earlier, it's like you can never retrieve like the highlights. Like if you overexpose, it's way harder to bring back that information versus like if you're boosting the shadows, it's easier. I don't know if you would agree with that, Vincent, but that's what I've had like in my experience.
Yeah. For me, if I was in your position, Dimitar, I would honestly just shoot this at a regular exposure and then adjust the exposure on the computer in post. Um, and then if you use the general exposure slider, it's going to bring everything down, and then from there you can adjust your shadows and highlights to fine tune it the way you want. That would be my approach to it. Uh,
It's
I
funny
do.
because I never use the exposure slider. Everything but the exposure, because it brings a ton of noise to my footage.
Yeah, I mean, for you, the what you're trying to accomplish here, you've got to be really careful with your ISO, keep it as low as possible. But um, yeah, that goes back to experimenting, like Brad said. There's several different ways you could achieve the same end result, and playing with it and seeing which sequence of adjustments to make is gonna help you find
Yeah.
your best final output. But I'll let Brad. I'll quit
All right,
talking. I'll let
Brad,
Brad finish.
you got your turn on Wyatt.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and honestly, man, the other thing I was gonna say too, like I just sifted through a couple of your other videos, your actual drum videos, and like now I see like that dark, lit, like moody kind of look you're going for, and like I'm not gonna lie, man, it's pretty sick. I dig the dark look, so like that's
Thanks,
yeah,
bro.
no, it's really really dope. Um, so yeah, like and okay, so Wyatt, um, man, I picked a reaction video again. So I don't know if this is because I've seen like a lot of your videos, and one of the things that I was thinking of was like the whole composition stuff and like what's in the background. Like same thing like with what Vincent said. Um, that's kind of what I've actually done a lot in the past. So like to to all the newbies out there, like this is like man, I tossed away tons of stuff as well. When the subject was just looking like amazing in the image, but like there's just too much stuff going on in the background. It's too distracting. It's taking away from the subject. Um, so it's something like I like. I mean, Vincent already alluded to, but that's like I just want to like reinforce that message because that's something like I've done like way too many times, and it's just something like to be like super conscious of. But anyways, um, with I picked a reaction video. What was it the with Orion reacts God of Fire by Fit for a King? Now, like I don't watch too many reaction videos, but I see that this is like I don't know that maybe this is me and like my ADHD, but like I just have like a problem with like staying focused and keeping my attention on like say like the video when it's just kind of like the same thing in frame. I don't know if this is like a common theme because again I don't watch too many reaction videos, but I don't know if this is a common theme where um, reaction videos are typically just shot like in one frame or one angle, but like for me as a viewer, again, I'm being super nitpicky. Um, but I would say like is like I ideally I guess to like for me like I would like to see like more than one angle. And I don't know why it's just something that kind of came to mind. Again, I'm being nitpicky. Like the videos are great, so but like I eventually like I'm just looking at the same thing and I'm just kind of like okay, like I don't know, like I eventually start to like lose attention, but at the same time like I'm not listening through like the whole like audio, so cuz like I'm listening to the conversation through you guys on the podcast, so not really I guess maybe like listening to audio might have me more engaged, but I don't know, I just that's something like maybe like I would consider um is having like multiple angles. I don't know how you would make that fit into the reaction videos, like having like more than one angle. um I'm not really. I'm just trying to think right now, like on the fly, like how could you like incorporate that, like whether it be like an angle from like the side or like when something like crazy happens, you guys are kind of jumping up and down, or you say say for example like the couch, what was it? The one that you guys did with it was Matt and Orion when I was over at your guys' house. You guys were filming that, and it was like something about I can't remember what the title of the video was. Do you know which one?
Yeah, it was our breakdown video.
Yeah, the breakdown
of
video.
course,
So
yeah.
like when you guys are like jumping around and kind of like kind of going out of frame, like if that were to happen, it's like you guys could like picture like it's like a camera that's like off to the side, and it's kind of like the behind this almost here. There's an idea having like a behind the scenes camera that's shooting like when you guys like say jump out of frame and you guys go crazy for like a breakdown or something, or you're like, oh man, this is so crazy or what, you know what I mean? So I don't know
Yeah,
if
I do.
that's something like, again, like I'm being like really nitpicky, but that I think that would be something super cool to see, something like unique. So I don't know, like what do you think about that?
What do I think about it? I think about it's great. I think it's great advice for anybody at home. Figure out how to direct the attention of what you're trying to bring attention to the audience in the most efficient way. Cool. So yeah, I mean, like, I think only to take it a step further, I think first of all it's a great idea, and to take it even a step further, I would say I would frame the second camera back and farther away, but also make it very rough. Like I would say, like if you're using, which I am in all these videos, if you're using like some kind of filter, I have everything, kind of like more of a, I guess it's more of a cinematic feel, right? Like I have a I've adjusted, like it's not just raw out of the camera. There's clearly I boosted the contrast. I've played around with the white balance. I've done all these things to make it look like more like a polished piece. Now you take the camera that you're describing, this secondary camera, you pull it back away from it so that you can see the main camera in the angle, but then you get a better overall look of the set. And maybe when you cut to that camera, you could cut to that camera and not actually affect its image, where its image could still be raw to make it even more exaggerated that this is behind the scenes. And we're having, it's almost like, because of how crazy it has become in the main camera, we have to cut to the secondary camera that we weren't even planning on using. And you're getting to see all this stuff that you weren't even supposed to see because we have to somehow fit everybody into the image because the song is just too amazing. Oh my God. You know what I mean? So I think it's a very cool idea. I actually probably am going to steal that and use it. I have cameras on the way. So now that I have more than one camera and I'm going to be able to film multiple angles, you guys might see a secondary angle in our reactions.
What did you
Now,
order?
with all
That's
that,
pretty sick.
yeah, right. I think it's a great idea. Thank you, Brad. I hope you don't mind me ripping you off here, but I'm going to roll with that. Cool, guys. So we've been going for an hour, 2 hours and 10 minutes, and this has been a extremely informative, extremely enjoyable podcast. Thank you so much to our guests. Thank you, Brad Tate. You can find Brad Tate at, go ahead, hit me with your plug, hit me with your socials.
At the Bradley Tate on Instagram, Facebook, and Bradley is Bradly. There's no E in the Lee. Everybody gets that confused, but yeah, no E in the Lee. My mother just wanted me to be special and name me a little bit different than all the other Bradleys. So you can find me at the Bradley Tate.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. No E in the Lee. Sounds good. All right, Vincent, where can we find you?
I have an Instagram that I don't use as much as I should because I'm terrible at socials, but it's instagram.com/JVSanchez_photography, and that's Sanchez with a Z, so JVSANCHEZ_photography.
Perfect. Awesome. Cool. Dimitar, anything
Thank
you
you
want to
very
say in
much.
wrapping up?
Well, the only thing I can say is that I had a hell of a blast for these 2 hours, and I really hope that in the near future we can expand on this and we can talk on more advanced themes with Vincent and Brad. And yeah, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for giving us 2 hours of your time, and it was hell of an episode. I hope it will be as useful to the other people as it was to us. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you all, and peace.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.